Viewers out there, thank you for joining us again. The Big R, as you know that the Big R stands for all the positive R words like reading, research, resilience, responsibility. I like emphasizing on responsibility, relationship, review, reflect, reposition, results, response, records, all those positive R words, you can name them. And
Red Bank.
pardon?
Red Bank.
The Red Bank and the Rand too, eh? And the Rand too. Muhammad, how did I come up with this Big R? I had financial problems, like the majority of us. I know from childhood, I always wanted to have money. But remember, there's no school that teaches how money works, what is money, all those nitty-gritty. Because once you know something, then you'll be able to deal with it. But if you don't know what is it, you won't be able to understand. So I was always in troubles financially. And I was in Mashonisas, whole lot of Mashonisas. I knew all the Mashonisas in Kempton Park, even the new ones that were coming. But I was not solving my problems. And then I would get promotion. No promotion, you would enjoy money 1 month, second month, then back to square one. In 2000, I decided I just resigned. Literally resigned. I didn't know where I was going. I just took a leap of faith. Well, I've written about all this in my books. And why I'm writing books. Remember, as people, we learn from the past. Now, I was thinking that maybe one day my children will also want to know how to make money. And they will go through what I've went through and learn. Immediately after discovering the secrets of money, then I decided to write a book. My first book was called Secrets for Becoming Rich, after discovering the secrets for becoming rich. Now, because I got that secret via reading, via doing research, checking results and so on, then I said, you need a positive ROIs. You need to keep records of everything that you do. So that's when the name, the Big R, came into picture. I said, if you are to solve a problem, Big R solution is the way to go. Now, because I wanted to solve financial problem, so Big R focuses on finance. Then I decided to do debt counseling, as a course. The reason why I wanted to understand debt, because debt plays a major role in finance. And I don't regret, I learn every day, every day I learn. And then I continued, today I'm a financial advisor and I'm still studying, I'm still doing my diploma and so on and so on. Then I started financial services. So that's how the Big R came into existence. Now, remember, I said one of those positive R words is relationship. I met the gentleman on my left-hand side, on my screen, probably on your screen will be on the right-hand side. I met Muhammad in one of our meetings, debt counseling meetings, and then they announced him as the head of debt review. And guess what? We as debt counselors, we always want to talk to people in debt review, especially when they say it's a head, because when we have problems, we want to, that's when the relationship started. And guess what? Muhammad has been very nice ever since. I never had problems. He's a very difficult man to get, but whenever you get hold of him, and then he'll resolve your problem. If you don't get hold of him, send him an email. Finally, you resolve the problem. Remember, as much as we are in debt review, if the relationship is not good, there's nothing that we are going to solve. So we need to have a very good relationship so that we talk about these things. Because at the end of the day, we are human beings. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have Muhammed Laher. Is it Laher, the surname?
Yeah, it's good enough.
Laher, okay. He's the head of debt review at ABSA, and we all know ABSA is one of the major banks in our country.
So I must actually interrupt you, Mr. Chabalala. I'm not actually the head. I've actually got a different position, but I guess we'll chat about it shortly.
Okay, okay. He will rectify that. And then, Mr. Mohammed, you know, we are happy to talk to you. The reason why we started this YouTube channel, we want to explain these financial jargons, these financial concepts that are very difficult. You know, debt review is being seen as a monster, and I can tell you it's not a monster. Now we want to make it easy. Now you guys as creditors, you are having your own position and your own understanding. And then we as debt counselor, we also have our understanding, the consumers too. So we need to bring all this together so that people can understand. Now, I've introduced you, Mohammed. Then you can tell us, like you are saying, you're correcting me, your proper position or the right description of your position.
Thanks, Holly. So I think at the outset, I think it's a wonderful initiative. I think it's great to see guys out there that care enough to go the extra mile, spend the extra rands and come up with initiatives of this nature. I think the primary focus is, from what I get, is education, right? Not just for us. We will learn a lot of stuff from this, but for the broader credit community, not even the review community. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. So yeah, well done on that. Keep it going, keep pushing, never give up, because we need more of this.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I think I'll jump into one of the R's. I think relationship is something you touched on, Sobri, and I think particularly in the debt counseling or debt review industry, relationships is just about everything. I think it's no secret that we don't have the most eloquently drafted piece of legislation in the National Credit Act. I mean, and I don't say this merely off my own accord. We've seen High Court judges echo these sentiments, just kind of highlighting the defects, many of them within the NCA. I think what that's done is, yes, one, it's posed challenges to us as an industry, but two, it's forced us to work together. And I think if you think back to the early days of the NCA, I think the relationship between credit provider and debt counselor, and I think the industry within itself in general was quite an antagonistic relationship, right? I think there was it was a lot of us, for lack of a better word, fighting amongst ourselves, pushing our own views, guys pushing their own agendas. And I think at some point everyone just kind of realized that, look, relationships matter. We got to make this thing work together. The law takes time to change, and we got to, for the sake of our mutual customers, the consumers, we got to work together to benefit them and make this process work. Otherwise, it's a lose situation for that counselor, for credit provider, for consumer, and I think that happened in the early days. Unfortunately, that perhaps tarnished the reputation of the industry a bit as well. And I think notwithstanding all of those challenges and all that we've come through in the wonderfully or maybe not so wonderfully drafted legislation we've been dealt with, I think we've come a hell of a long way. I think particularly over the past few years, we work together quite closely through debt counselors individually, through debt counselor associations, through industry engagements. And I think that's made a world of a difference. We've seen the impact of the task team agreements that it's had on the process, the positive impact it's had on the process. I think even the regulators come to the party and kind of worked with the industry in crafting these guidelines and circulars and just platforms for us to engage on, like the Credit Industry Forum and the rest of it. So I think that's a bit of background. In terms of what I do at ABSA, I'm no longer in operational space anymore, although I do help out there. Like I said, I know many of the debt counselors through previous engagements. So where I can, I still assist on the ops side. However, primarily I'm involved in strategy at the bank. So that's my main focus is driving strategy, that review strategy and industry engagements through the banking association, through various other mechanisms that the bank has elected as priority. So I think that's kind of where I fit in the big puzzle of the bank.
Mm, mm, mm. You know, you touch on something very important, that the relationship was very antagonistic. I remember quite well. Clients would go under debt review, but they would lose cars still under debt review. Clients would fight with us. It was now this against them. So there was no harmony, but now we work very well. And remember, even the courts, if you go to court, because
Oh,
get so many litigation or dispute resolution issues. So they would always ask, guys, have you tried to resolve it before you bring it here? Because that shows that they encourage that people should relate. People should be able to talk and resolve matters. You know, I was speaking to one of the magistrates, a friend of mine happened to be a magistrate. He was telling me that, you know, sometimes we've got thousands of cases. Said, can imagine, you know, when people talk, argue, it takes. He says, can imagine round about 4 or 5, how exhausted a person is. He said, now, some of them, you don't even listen, just, and that's a human element, you know, that's possible. I don't want to talk bad. This guy was telling me, you know, in camera to say, you know, it's understandable. You end up saying, let it pass, you know, because you're exhausted. Your mind can't even grasp anymore.
No, exactly.
Yeah, so the relationship helps that we don't go there, all right? And then you have also mentioned the National Credit Regulator. And I must say, tomorrow I'm with the legal advisor from NCR so that we hear their perspective, what's happening. And then, yeah, Timmy, you'll be here tomorrow. And then one day you need to come to our studio. I want to see you more frequently. And then so that we discuss, you know, if I have problems around issues of ABSA, and we'll continue to encourage people to send us messages on our WhatsApp messages. What problem do they encounter with ABSA? Then we pass them to you, because that way it also helps you to resolve and then to be on the cutting edge of the situation. So
100%.
Yeah, so I think it will definitely help. Now, let me go here immediately. Now, debt counseling, ever it came into existence, was it a good thing or a bad thing for creditors?
Yeah, I think, and I'll go back to the early days where I don't think many creditors seen it as a good thing, right? It was this it's forced upon the industry at large. It forced the credit provider to suspend payments or reduce installments and cut down interest. And I think, I mean, as a natural consequence, nobody likes to lose money, right? Nobody's in the game of borrowing money to lose that money. So as a natural consequence, I think it was difficult for the credit industry to swallow it large, particularly from a credit provider perspective. But I think as the process started becoming more streamlined, and we were able to work with debt counselors more effectively, and we're able to get consumers rehabilitated, which is quite important. I think, I mean, I know certainly at ABSA, one of our measures is how many consumers have we rehabilitated, because the end game is not getting someone out of debt review because through a termination process where they've kind of defaulted, but rather to get clearance certificates out and to get a consumer rehabilitated and back out into the credit market. And I think that's more where we are right now. We want to help our customers. We want to get our customer financially free and want to have him back out in the market and be able to make more informed decisions the second time around. Hopefully it's not the third or fourth. We've seen those instances.
Yeah,
in fact, we've seen clients that have come in 9 times or more. But yeah, once or twice, we certainly would encourage these consumers to get through the entire process get out in a better space and make more informed decisions. Obviously, we can't control unforeseen circumstances, right? I mean, this year has been a perfect example of that. Life happens, the world moves on, viruses hit us, and I'm sure there'll be a bunch of other things that we haven't planned for that's going to hit us. So I think for us as the credit provider, one is that we want to show our clients that we're actually there for them through the difficult times. And I think we've put in, particularly around COVID, and I'm sure we'll chat about it a bit more later on, but we've put in various measures to assist consumers through this rough patch. But I think the same holds true for any rough patch that a consumer may be going through. We've got measures in place where we'd like to assist them. We'd like for them to be in a position to afford to pay themselves out of the hole. And even if it takes time, I think there's appetite from ABSA as a credit provider to assist where possible.
Let me ask this specific question and a direct question. Are the creditors making good money now during the time of debt cancelling, or they are not making money? I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. Remember, the majority of some of these clients, they will get lost along the way. It would be difficult to trace them. Remember, debt collection, it has its own challenges. I'm not saying it's a bad arrangement or bad program. You need to have a court order, and then the courts are full before you can enforce it. And we know what happened. People were complaining. These guys who are collecting, they jump, they break the people's gates. It becomes another case on top of another case. Now, the question that I would like to know, has debt cancelling managed to bring those people who normally get lost along the way to come back and start paying now, and whereby creditors are starting to get their money? Because remember, you borrowed them in good faith. And now also with them, it's not that they are acting in bad faith. Others probably they have lost their job. Others probably they've took more than what they can chew. But now with debt cancelling, they are starting to come back. Are creditors, I'm not referring to ABSA only, are creditors now benefiting out of this program?
Okay, so I'll answer you with two kind of mindsets. One is, well, one part of your question is whether we see more consumers being roped back in. And I think that's certainly the case. It's happening more and more frequently where we see, let's call it a conversion rate or success rate through the debt counseling process. So that's certainly positive. I think the more direct question which you posed was, are credit providers making money? Bottom line is no, you're probably losing money. So, I mean, what a lot of people perhaps don't know off the face of it is that there's quite a technical accounting treatment, or it's a very technical accounting treatment that happens in the background. And that kind of deals with impairments, and when a consumer enters a regulated process, the bank has to, on their books, have to financially impair for this, and they have to treat an account differently. And I mean, that amounts to, with these various policies that different credit providers would use, but in essence is you're writing off a bit of your debt every time a consumer comes into the debt review space. You're also almost always writing off interest that you would have collected outside of that review space. So I think for a credit provider, debt reviews it's not about making money. It's more about offering assistance to consumers that are not in the best spot financially and trying to get them out of it. And I think the money will come at a later point. So I think at this point in the consumer's life cycle, perhaps the main objective for credit provider is not to make money off this consumer, is to get this consumer healthy into a financially stable, a more financially literate background, so that in the future, when this consumer needs further services, he'd be in a better position to take on those services, to appreciate the risks involved with those services, and naturally then we'd have a mutually beneficial relationship where the credit provider will then be able to make money while the consumer would still be able to kind of fulfill his financial needs.
May I ask this a direct question? Are you saying debt review is bad for creditors or good for creditors?
No, it's good look, I mean, it's good because it helps consumers that are, I mean, on our books, our consumers, it's mutual clients, right? It's a client, it's not only a debt counselor's client, it's
Yeah.
a credit provider's client as well.
Yes, yes.
So this process helps our client get to a better spot. So I don't think there's any way we can say it's not good. I think it's certainly good. Um, Perhaps what I referred to is that there may be a negative financial impact naturally, right? And that's one that the credit provider would generally be willing to take to get the consumer to a better place. So a credit provider would budget and pay and go through their financial means and models and work it out so that they're able to do that to get the consumer through the process um, and into a better place for the future. So yes, there'll be a financial knock on a credit provider. But that doesn't necessarily follow that it's bad for the credit provider. I think quite to the contrary, it's actually in the long term good for the credit provider.
May I be right if I say, from another perspective, it's good because remember, the consumer will go back to the credit industry again. Let's say you went under debt review because of unsecured loan, or a short-term loan, or a car, but now he's cleared. Because I'm asking this question, I've seen clients who are under debt review with us here, and then come after 5 years they're out, I see them buying houses, taking a bond, which is now a very big product for the bank. So I'm saying in that way, in the long term, it's good for credit industry.
Spot on, 100%.
Because they come back big time and get good things. I know one of the guys who was here with me, he bought a mansion using the bank's money. And then he also bought one of these big Nissan, costing almost $500,000. And the guy was under debt review. So if you look it from that perspective, I think it was good for creditors, also for the consumer. Remember, as consumers, we want to live a very good life. You don't want to work, but you don't live a good life. I know of a client who was staying in Tembisa. As I speak to you, he's just my next door neighbor. And then he moved from Tembisa, he bought a house here, and then he increased a number of fleet. So in a way, I'm just supporting what you are saying. In the long run, good for everybody. It's good for creditors. It's also good for the consumers. Am I right?
100% right. There's one other spin-off that maybe isn't that apparent. And it's an analogy I like to make when we do deal with the queries that come through. Debt review is a very special way of kind of unpacking a bad faith consumer against a bad luck consumer. And I always say that from a bank's perspective or from ABSA perspective, a bad luck consumer will go to the ends of the world and try and assist you where possible and help you out where we could. But then you've got the bad faith consumer, and we know it pops up. It's not all of them, but it pops up every now and again where a consumer knows the system and kind of plays the system, right? And I think I referenced earlier on a consumer that we know went through the process of nine different times. And if you look at that, if you get yourself 9 times through a process which provides you 60 business days, which is 3 months, you've bought yourself a decent amount of time with being protected from credit providers legally. So yeah, it has a knack of unfolding the bad faith versus the bad luck, and that's also positive because the bad luck can be very expeditiously dealt with outside of that review, and the bad faith can continue to be supported through the process.
I'll tell you one thing. If you've got the bad faith people, I think hard luck for them, because people need to understand that debt is new money. If you don't understand that debt is new money, then you are lost. Because you can build your wealth with debt. But which one? The good debt, not the bad debt. So get rid of the bad debt so that you can get into the good debt. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, debt review, you know, using my own practice has bring a lot of relief to a lot of people. And some of them are now my friends. We talk from time to time. But when they were coming here, they were crying, screaming, and but now they are happy. You know, they see the brighter side of things. Because remember, before debt review, there was no mechanism. There was administration. I'm not bashing administration, but it has its own bad side of it. It's long as compared to debt review. So for me, from where I am, debt review has contributed immensely to both the consumers, debt counselors in terms of employment, and creditors too. It has played a very positive role. But probably when I speak to Tim, probably I'll get the numbers in terms of the contribution that this has brought to the GDP or the economy of the country as a whole. And then how many countries in the world are doing debt review, if you know?
Look, it's I don't know the exact number, but I know it's quite well established across the globe. I know there's a model in the UK which is not too far off the South African model. I believe there's a model in Canada as well. I know there's a model in Australia, which is again not too far off, as well as New Zealand from the South African models. I believe some of the countries in Southeast Asia have adopted the concept, because obviously each country would adopt it specific to their population, their needs and requirements. But I think in principle, it's the same thing. So yeah, it's quite widespread. I think we don't know too much about the rest, but I know that it is widespread. I know that it's adopted in Europe. I know in the States as well. I know some of our neighbors have been looking at it off late as well. I know Swaziland has been looking at it not too long ago. I think it's Namibia, Botswana as well have been looking at the potential financial relief system. And I think us ourselves our government has also been looking at additional measures to help assist financially strained consumers. We've seen that the latest amendments to the National Credit Act, right, which provides for an entirely new process, or just about an entirely new process called debt intervention. And again, that's pretty much run off a very similar concept and operational model as debt counseling. So it seems, from what we've got thus far, and I think it's an additional mechanism specifically geared at unsecured debt and lower income consumers.
I just wonder whether we are a little bit higher now to our consumers. Let me go to their level. If I may ask, and with respect, I'm not saying they cannot understand what we are talking about, but I want to talk about issues that really touches them. If from a creditor perspective, as ABSA, when does a person should know that now I need to go for debt review? Should a person wait to get Section 129 first, or certain factors or signs they must show to the client? If you can give me few of them to say, you know, if things are like this, start now exploring the avenue of using debt counseling.
I think perhaps the most blatant sign would be when you find yourself at one credit provider trying to seek further extension of credit in order to extinguish a need of another credit provider. To put it simpler, when you start borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, at that point there should be red alarm bells with a loud siren going off somewhere upstairs saying something's not right, I need external assistance. Okay, so that's blatantly obvious, but I think that's not the only point. I think
While we are still there, sorry to cut you short. You know what you have
Mhm,
just outlined? I like calling it Mashonisa. You know what the Mashonisa
mhm,
stands for? Mashonisa is a
mhm,
Zulu word which simply
mhm.
means pull you down.
Oh, is that what it means, eh?
Yeah, that's what it means, pull you down. It's a Zulu word, Mashonisa, pull you down. Now,
Okay.
that activity of a person borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, it's Mashonisa. I'll tell you why am I saying that. I'm saying Mashonisa is the intention. If you borrow money with a wrong intention, that's what is pulling you down. And I
Mhm,
know in most cases, people associate Mashonisa with, a small businessman who's borrowing money not registered, or Stockfell that borrows money. They say those are the Mashonisa. I said, no, no, no. Mashonisa is the intention. You find Mashonisa in big banks. You find Mashonisa in a retail business that borrows money. The intention.
mhm.
If I borrow money for consumption, that's Mashonisa. I just wanted to explain what we have.
It's very profound, Sobri. I like that. I like that. Um, so I think perhaps back to your question, then I think the easiest and most practical way to put it is when you get a feeling of uneasiness, something in your gut tells you that, you know what, I'm struggling, I can't afford. Um, the and perhaps a more mechanical way or more calculated way is when you start writing your debts down and you notice you're unable to. Um, Words of encouragement would be to rather go sooner than later. So I think there's no harm, even if you just have a slight sense of uneasiness. There's absolutely no harm in approaching a debt counselor just to seek advice. You don't necessarily have to be over indebted. You could merely feel a slight struggle to be repay or to be able to repay your loans, and I think it often helps that a debt counselor merely there's a discussion and dispenses advice. And I mean, I've worked within various aspects of the debt counseling field previously, including as a debt counselor. Um, Sometimes all you need is actually a budget and someone outside of your close circle kind of telling you what to do. It's always easier to tell someone else what to do than to kind of craft out these solutions for yourself in your own life. So I think often if you merely go to a debt counselor, vent out your issues, ventilate your issues, very important is to actually document your issues, to try and get a real sense of what's there, because I've often seen consumers so embroiled in their debt that they walk into the doors and they don't even know how many credit agreements they have. And then eventually they'll pop out 7. In the meantime, there's 2 others lurking in the background. And you say, how much do you owe? And their account is around 200,000. And when you go to the banks and they come back with the actual debt, it's more like 370,000. Um, so I think, and it's very easy to get to that point. People get flustered by these things. People are desperate, right? Sometimes, yes, sometimes it's unforeseen circumstances. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you lose a job, sometimes you've got a medical emergency, and you just can't afford it, and there's a kind of downward spiral, if you can call it that. So someone that can stop that downward spiral is probably a debt counselor. And I'm not saying only go to a debt counselor. I'm saying perhaps even a better place to take it one step prior. The first place you could probably start with is speaking to your credit provider. There's absolutely no harm in coming to your credit provider and saying, listen, I'm under strain. Can you assist me? And maybe the answer is not always by giving you additional funds, but there's a deeper answer where we can find a different solution for clients. Where debt counselor is perhaps more useful is where you've got exposures to various credit providers. So if you've got 1 or 2 credit providers, perhaps as a consumer, it's a lot easier for you to have the direct chat to the 1 or 2 credit providers. But in instances where there's 6 or 7, perhaps it's a bit more tedious. And I know trying to figure out the right department at the right credit provider can be difficult. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of that as well. You may have an account with ABSA, but then it may not be, you're not just going to call ABSA, you're going to call ABSA, and then you need to find out if it's the loan department or the credit card department or the vehicle finance department. And then once you get there, you need to get into the collections department or the client services department, to, so I think that's where there's value in getting to the debt counselor. The debt counselor knows the correct entry points. They do it for a living, so they're well acquainted and they're well versed with the different procedures within each of the credit providers. They also, have the bureau at their fingers, so they have access to additional insights that many consumers wouldn't have taken the initiative to, let's call it initiative, but wouldn't have gone through the trouble of even going through a bureau and looking at their credit ratings and their credit scores. And I think, there's a lot of value in going to see a debt counselor, and again, sooner rather than later. The worst thing, the best thing that can happen is that you can walk out of there and the debt counselor can say to you, actually not over indebted, you fine, just be responsible. The worst thing that can happen, I don't know if I want to call it the worst thing, okay, but one of two things that can happen. One is that you are actually just being slightly irresponsible and you can manage your finances better and you'll be fine. And you've lost absolutely nothing if that's the outcome. And two is you actually are over indebted and you do need help. And the debt counselor can then take you and guide you through that entire process. And there again, you've lost nothing, but you've gained everything, right? You've gained the fact that you're not going to be borrowing more money, which you cannot afford to pay back. You're not going to be applying for loans to registered, and then when you don't get accepted at registered credit providers, I think we know that many consumers then go to the underground market, if we can call it that, or to unregistered lenders, and I think that's asking for trouble. So let's avoid the downward spiral and that black hole, and go see your debt counselor sooner rather than later. He'll sort you out, we hope. And
you
again, the banks.
You know what?
Yes.
As much as what you said, the past always helps. Recollect what happened. One of my clients at some point said, "No, I've got a lot of credit agreements, but the majority of them were those underground guys." And then I said, in the truth, because these people are registered, the chances are they may not get their money because they've broken the law. They were supposed to register. But I said, it's your choice. You may pay them or not. But the thing is, they'll kill you. Don't take that.
Yeah.
They will.
No, it's a real.
They will kill you. So it's a question of you sometimes controlling yourself. Now, education. How important is education in all this? Remember the big R, we are dealing with education, financial education. And then I always say, if you want to leverage up your financial education, once you have upped your financial education, you leverage much easier. So how important is education? And then how does ABSA in particular see the necessity of educating consumers around the issue of finance and financial management?
I think, look, it's extremely important. The one thing that actually brought a smile to my face is in the current NCA amendments, the act that's come out, the amendments to the Credit Act, where a consumer goes through the debt intervention process, it's compulsory. There's a compulsory element of financial education there and awareness. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. I think there's been many noble intentions within the industry to roll out education and awareness initiatives. And I think there's been some issues. I think many consumers don't have the appetite, right? You can only educate someone that wants to learn. And when a lot of people, the only solution is more credit. Give me more money and I'll sort everything out, or give me more money and I'm happy. And it's not a great attitude to have, but it's the easy way out, right? The way where I don't have to learn the hard truths of life, and I can just get survive for perhaps as long as possible.
Yeah.
What we don't realize is that it builds a different stress, right? So I see
Yeah.
it in there. And I think, I mean, it's vital that we get consumers educated. As a bank, we've got a whole team that does financial awareness and education, and there's millions in sponsorship, I'm sure, that goes through that pipeline. I mean, people do this for a living within the bank space, so there's definitely appetite in that. As ABSA Debt Review, we've also done a few things from an education perspective, and maybe not only consumers. We've actually, believe it or not, so we've crafted up a couple of full-on courses with NQF accreditations, or some of them within the process of getting NQF accreditations. We've worked with the University of Pretoria and a couple of other institutes where we actually created debt counseling courses, full-on NQF accredited courses where other credit providers can actually send their staff through to the University of Pretoria, whichever other institutes will start running these courses, and because it's great that consumers need to be trained, but the person that's sitting in the bank that's taking Sobri's score, debt counselor, needs to be skilled and trained as well in order to help our client that's out there, right? So we've created a bunch of those initiatives as a bank as well. One of the things we've started off late is a welcome back, and it may seem like a small thing, Sobri. It's just a little document, electronic document. It's emailed to clients that give us, or that we have email addresses on record. We try and send out a multimedia one where we can through the cell phone, but it's a little thing that I'm sure a lot of DCs appreciate, and they've come back to us and said, you know what, thank you. It keeps the client, one, a comfort, but also this big debt counseling process can be overwhelming, right? For a consumer, it's because it's not just a process I'm going through. It's an entire lifestyle change. I'm cutting off luxuries. I'm no more having access to credit. I'm taking advice from a debt counselor. Is it legitimate? What if the bank still comes for my car? And I think what we do is we kind of just go through the process very briefly. We kind of give the consumer a sense of comfort, a place to gauge, and we take the consumer from COB or 17.1 stage right through to the court order stage, and everything that kind of comes in between. And I know that's been warmly received from our end. So small initiatives, but there's big ones in the background as well.
You know what?
I think to end that point, so please keep doing what you do. I think you're one of the very few debt counselors that, again, I said it in the start and I'll say it again, one of the very few that takes out his own time, own personal resources. And I think, you know, we hear the passion from you every time you speak.
Yeah, sure.
And it's much welcome. So
yeah. You know what? You have mentioned something very important. Teach the people who wants to be taught. You know, I know that experience. You go to people and say, teaching me about what? My money. How do you teach me about my money? So they resist from the word go. Don't teach me about my money. Who are you in the first place to teach me about my money? Now it goes further. A person says, I have a financial, I said, why? Advise me what? On what? My money. I don't need advice. It's my money. I've worked for it. So that's a story for another day. You know, we've got a whole lot of things that we can talk about. And the Big R, we write so many books. One of them is this one. I don't know whether you can see.
Flip it around.
Okay. There you are. There you are.
Attitude.
Attitude is it's one of the elements that is in there. But the heading simply says how I turned 500 Rand into a million Rand business. Now, when I started my business, I had 500 Rand. And you know, I'm a former teacher. I'm from education space. Hence, you see now, I'm still doing education. So my businesses failed. There were others that I started. I failed dismally. And I lost my house. Everything is in the book here. And then a friend of mine came to me and said, man, you were once a teacher, man. why don't you start training? I said, you know what, you are right. I had 500 Rand. I had company registered already. So I then decided that with this 500 Rand, I went to CPRO. By then it was CPRO, not now it's CPIC.
CIPC.
Adjust CIPC, yeah. Adjust the company to include training. Then I bought small transparencies, and then I went around marketing. And then when people say, "Can you train?" I said, "Of course, as long as you have overhead projector and the place, the hall, and the screen, I'm there for you." I would literally write by hand. That's when I started my business. It started slowly. As I was getting money, I would take it back to business. That was before I became a debt counselor. Then along the way, because debt counseling, like I say, it's one of the subjects that teaches you about money. Then I decided to become a debt counselor. I added on that. So that is the reason why I wrote that book. And then why I wrote about attitude. You see, let's say you take a letter A and equate it to number 1. A letter B equated to 2, all right? Then I would ask a question. There is any weight that can give you 100%. You go for love, add those letters and see whether you get 100%. You go for hard work, just have a look. But if you go for attitude, it will definitely give you 100%. Everything is in the attitude. Now, why I'm saying everything is in the attitude? Can you imagine when I first met you, my attitude, even your attitude towards each other was negative? Were we going to have this relationship going forward? Not at all.
Not at all.
And remember, only relationship can take you somewhere. If the relationship is not good, you're not going to make it in life. You know, I always tell my son and say, if you realize that this relationship is toxic, move away, but don't have enemies. Because once you have enemies, remember, enemies always plan to pull you down. You rather have more friends than enemies. Yeah. If whoever that you have a relationship with is not bringing anything to the party, move away nicely. Don't be funny to them, but move away. One thing for sure, you don't have an enemy. You've just moved on. So hence this attitude. It boils down to attitude. So I just wanted to give, we have written about 4 books, Secrets for Becoming Rich. That was the first book that I wrote once I discovered the secret. And then I wrote this one as the second one, How I Turned 500 Rand into a $1 million business. Then I also wrote How to Get Out of Bad Debt, Use Other People's Money and Resources to Get Rich. And then also Secrets for Becoming Rich, second edition, where I talk about bank products, because people don't understand the difference of bank products. They just know, I go to the bank, I'll get savings, but they don't give themselves time and understand what is savings account, what is check account, what is credit card, what is overdraft, you know? Because these things were not just done because the names are beautiful, you know? They have a meaning and reasoning. So I want to close it here because I look at the time. I've detained you for more than an hour now, but I'm sure I'm going to have you again because there's still a lot to talk. And then I'm going to call all people out there who are listening. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel because you learn a lot. And guess what? You learn for free. Learn for free. And then that's one. And secondly, very important, ask questions. Any questions, whether it's ABSA, NetBank, Standard Bank, ask any questions. And then so that when we have your questions, as people out there, People like Muhammad, they're always in a building. They don't even know what's happening. Yes, they do research, but it's better to also to get your questions so that they can be able to answer you. All right. And then don't treat the banks as monsters. It's them against us. There's no them against us. We need to work as a team collaboratively. Muhammad, thus far,
Well said.
I can say, I don't know whether you want to add something there in your closing remarks. And once again, thank you for coming. Not many people agree. I've punished you, I've taken your time, your family time to be with us, with our viewers and talk to them.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And I think again, Sobri, thanks one for having me. Thanks too for putting the work you've done out there and for providing some sort of support and some sort of education and some way to go to for some of our lonely mutual clients. Keep doing what you do, and I think we shall meet for the next one in person somewhere, hopefully.
Thank you. I'll appreciate. Come to our studio here. Then we'll give you a cup of coffee.
and a signed copy of each book, right?
Yeah, sure. Exactly.
Okay, done deal.
Yes, much appreciated.
Keep well. Thanks again.
Thank you.